History is full of cruel queens, women whose ambition and ruthlessness let them claw their way into the history books. We're told stories of their wickedness, their insatiable lust for power, their so-called madness. These stories become legends, whispered for centuries until they're just accepted as fact. But what if the cruelest story ever told was a lie? What if the shocking tales about one queen's evil deeds weren't a reflection of her character at all, but a smokescreen, carefully crafted by powerful men to hide an unthinkable crime? Tonight, we're looking into one of the most horrifying accusations in royal history. A story of a princess betrayed by the one person who should have been her greatest protector, her own father. We're digging into the dark whispers that have clung to Queen Arsinoe II of Egypt for more than 2,000 years. But as we peel back the layers of slander, we're going to find a truth that is far more complex, and in its own way, far more shocking than the legend itself. This isn't just a story about one woman's suffering. It's a story about how history gets written and how the voices of powerful women get silenced by the men who fear them. The world Arsinoe was born into was a pressure cooker of ambition, violence, and wealth beyond imagining. It was the end of the 4th century BCE, and the massive empire built by Alexander the Great had just shattered. His most brilliant and ruthless generals were carving up the known world in a bloody free-for-all. Alliances were made and broken in the same breath, and kingdoms were prizes to be won, not inherited. In this brutal new world, a person's life was worth only as much as their political value. And for a princess, that value was measured in one thing: marriage. She was a pawn, a token, a seal on a contract signed in blood. Arsinoe was born into this viper's nest around 316 BCE. Her father was Ptolemy I, one of Alexander's most trusted commanders, a man who had grabbed the richest prize of all, Egypt. Her mother was the sharp and beautiful Berenice I. From her first breath in the new capital of Alexandria, Arsinoe was surrounded by power. She was raised in marble palaces, educated by the best minds in the world, and groomed for a life that mattered. But this gilded cage was surrounded by wolves. Her father's kingdom was built on the shifting sands of military might and political games. Every neighbor was a potential enemy, and every family member a potential rival. This was a world where a whisper could be as deadly as a dagger, and where a woman's survival depended on her cunning, not her virtue. This was the world that would shape her, and the world she would one day try to conquer. And it's here that the story of an unspeakable betrayal took root. The rumor that the great King Ptolemy looked at his own daughter not with love, but with monstrous lust. This is the stain that has defined her legacy. But is it true? To find out, we first have to understand the man she called father. Ptolemy I was a man forged by war. He was a Macedonian nobleman who had fought alongside Alexander the Great. But while other generals bled themselves dry fighting over Alexander's crumbling empire, Ptolemy made a calculated play. He seized the most stable, most defensible, and richest province, Egypt. With its ancient traditions and endless supply of grain, Egypt was both a fortress and a treasury. And Ptolemy wasn't just content to rule it. He understood the power of image. He declared himself Pharaoh, taking on the customs of rulers who had been there for 3,000 years. He started building the legendary Library of Alexandria and the Great Lighthouse, turning his capital into the center of the Mediterranean world. He was so good at propaganda that he even curated his own family history. Some ancient sources suggest Ptolemy himself may have spread a rumor that he wasn't the son of a minor noble, but an illegitimate son of Philip II, Alexander the Great's father. This would make him Alexander's half-brother, a lie designed to wrap him in a cloak of greatness. This was a man who knew that perception is reality. He was a master spin doctor, a man who could turn himself from a foreign conqueror into a divine savior, or soter, in the eyes of his subjects. His court was a tangled web of wives, mistresses, and children, all fighting for influence. Ptolemy was polygamous, which was common for Macedonian rulers. He had children with his wife Eurydice, and then with his favorite wife, Arsinoe's mother, Berenice. This created a bitter rivalry right inside the palace. Arsinoe's older half-brother, Ptolemy Keranos, was the son of Eurydice and, by tradition, the rightful heir. But Ptolemy I favored Berenice's children, and in a move that would change everything, he named Arsinoe's younger, full-blooded brother, Ptolemy II, as his successor. This decision turned the palace into a snake pit. Ptolemy Keranos, whose nickname meant Thunderbolt for his violent temper, was furious. He felt his birthright had been stolen, and he never forgave his father's other family. That simmering rage would one day explode in an act of unimaginable cruelty, with Arsinoe as the target. It's in this environment, a family at war with itself, a father who manipulated his own lineage for power, that the horrifying accusation against Ptolemy I has to be examined. The story alleges that this master propagandist, this god king, violated his own daughter, Arsinoe. It's a story that paints her as a tragic victim from the very beginning. But when you dig into the historical record, a huge problem appears. The sources that detail Arsinoe's life, historians like Pausanias, Plutarch, and Justin, talk about her marriages, her ambition, her political skill. But on the subject of rape by her own father, the ancient chronicles are completely silent. There is not a single credible historical account, no inscription, no papyrus fragment that backs up this shocking claim. So that forces us to ask a critical question. If it never happened, where did a monstrous story like this come from? The answer might not be in a single act of violence, but in the brutal reality of her life and how violation can take many forms. Arsinoe's life was in fact defined by forced marriages and betrayals by the men in her own family. The horror was real, but the villain in this first, foundational myth seems to be wrong. Her life was about to be thrown into chaos, not by her father, but by the cold, hard logic of politics that treated royal women as human currency. Her first ordeal was about to begin, and it would send her far from home and into the treacherous court of an aging, paranoid king. Around 300 BCE, when Arsinoe was just a teenager, maybe 15 or 16, her father made the first move in the chess game of her life. She was getting married. Her husband wasn't a young prince, but a man old enough to be her grandfather, Lysimachus, the king of Thrace. He was a battle-hardened man in his 60s, and Arsinoe was his third wife. This wasn't a love match. It was a cold, strategic alliance meant to create a pact between Ptolemy and Lysimachus against a common enemy. Arsinoe was the living seal on that treaty. She was shipped from the sophisticated city of Alexandria to the rough, militaristic court of Thrace. Her world was turned upside down, and she was thrown into another nest of vipers. Only this time, her family wasn't there to protect her. The court of Lysimachus was a dangerous place for a young queen. Lysimachus, like her father, had a complicated family. His heir was his oldest son, Agathocles, a popular and capable prince from another marriage. As the new wife, Arsinoe knew her position was fragile. Her only path to real power was to have sons of her own and make sure one of them took the throne, not Agathocles. She quickly gave Lysimachus 3 sons, but their birth only made the court intrigue worse. It created a dangerous split: the old guard, loyal to the heir Agathocles, and the new faction, loyal to the young queen Arsinoe. The tension got even worse when Agathocles married Arsinoe's own half-sister, Lysandra. This meant the heir to the Thracian throne was now married to a princess from a rival branch of her own family. The web was getting tangled and venomous. Arsinoe saw her son's future slipping away. Ancient historians, who were often hostile to powerful women, paint Arsinoe as the villain here. They claim that she, desperate to see her own son on the throne, cooked up a vicious lie. She is said to have convinced her aging husband Lysimachus that his own son, Agathocles, was plotting to kill him. According to these accounts, she preyed on the old king's paranoia until, in a fit of rage, Lysimachus had Agathocles executed. This act of a father killing his son sent shockwaves across the Greek world. It shattered Lysimachus's kingdom from the inside out. Whether Arsinoe really orchestrated this, or if she was just a convenient scapegoat for a paranoid old king, is impossible to know for sure. What we do know is that she got the blame. The narrative was set. Arsinoe, the scheming foreign queen, had destroyed the royal family for her own selfish gain. This story, of a woman using lies to advance her children, would follow her, becoming the first layer of slander on a reputation that would only get darker. And the chaos she was accused of creating was about to swallow her whole. The murder of Agathocles created a power vacuum that their rival, Seleucus I, was happy to exploit. In 281 BCE, the armies of Seleucus and Lysimachus met in battle. Lysimachus, the old warrior, was killed. Suddenly, at about 35 years old, Arsinoe was a widow. Her protector was dead, her kingdom was gone, and her son's inheritance had vanished. She was a queen without a throne, trapped in enemy territory. She fled to the fortified city of Cassandria and barricaded herself inside with her sons. But the most dangerous predator in the region was already circling. And that predator was her own half-brother, the man who believed her family had stolen his future, Ptolemy Pharaoh, the Thunderbolt. He had been living in exile at Lysimachus's court, and now, with the king dead, he saw his chance to grab power. And Arsinoe was standing in his way. Ptolemy Pharaoh was a man defined by bitterness. As the oldest son of Ptolemy I, he expected to one day rule Egypt. But his father passed him over for his younger half-brother, Ptolemy II. Exiled and furious, Pharaoh wandered the world, a prince without a kingdom, his heart filled with resentment. After Lysimachus died, he moved fast. He assassinated the victorious king Seleucus and had himself declared the new king of Macedonia. But his claim was shaky. Standing against him was his own half-sister, Arsinoe, locked away in Cassandria. She was the widow of the last king, and her sons had a legitimate claim to the throne. Pharaoh knew a direct attack on the city would be long and bloody. So he chose a more twisted weapon, betrayal, disguised as family reconciliation. He approached his half-sister with a shocking proposal. He offered to marry her. It was a stunning idea. Marriage between half-siblings wasn't a common practice for the Greeks. But the political logic was brutal. By marrying Arsinoe, Pharaoh would neutralize her as a rival and absorb her son's claim to the throne. To sweeten the deal, he made a solemn promise. He would adopt her young sons and treat them as his own heirs. Arsinoe was trapped. She was alone, surrounded by enemies, and responsible for her children. She was a brilliant political thinker and deeply suspicious of Pharaoh. She knew what he was like, his violence, his festering hatred for her side of the family. But what choice did she have? Refusing meant a siege that would probably end with all of them dead. Accepting meant walking into a trap, but it offered a tiny sliver of hope. She tried to protect her sons. She demanded the marriage be public and that she be crowned queen in front of the army, forcing Pharaoh to acknowledge his promises. Pharaoh agreed to everything. The wedding was held, Arsinoe was crowned, and for a fleeting moment, it might have looked like she had pulled it off. The gates of Cassandria were opened, and Pharaoh entered the city. The second he was safely inside, his promises meant nothing. He revealed the true, monstrous nature of his plan. His goal was never unity, it was extermination. He gave the order, and his soldiers seized Arsinoe's two younger sons, who were just boys. Ancient sources describe a horrific scene. The boys, realizing what was happening, ran to their mother, clinging to her in terror. But there was no mercy. Pharaoh had them torn from her arms and butchered right in front of her. It was an act of almost unimaginable cruelty, a cold-blooded move to eliminate any rivals to his throne and the ultimate revenge against the family he believed had wronged him. Arsinoe herself was spared, but she was exiled, stripped of her title, her power, and now, her children. Her eldest son had managed to escape the slaughter and fled north. Broken and alone, Arsinoe had only one place left to go. She made the long journey back to the home she had left as a teenage bride, back to the glittering city of Alexandria, to seek refuge at the court of her full brother, King Ptolemy II. She arrived not as a powerful queen, but as a tragic figure, a victim of the deepest betrayal imaginable. She had survived the death of one king and the treachery of another. She had seen her own children murdered by her own brother. Many women would have crumbled, but Arsinoe was not like many women. The grieving sister was about to transform into a player more brilliant and more formidable than anyone could have ever imagined. The ultimate prize was still on the board, the throne of Egypt itself. We are now deep in the web of betrayal that defined Arsinoe's life. The lines between victim and villain are blurring, and her true power is starting to surface. If you find these dives into the dark, complex lives of historical figures as fascinating as we do, consider subscribing to the channel. We uncover these hidden histories every week, and you won't want to miss where this story goes next. Because Arsinoe's return to Egypt isn't the end. It's the beginning of her most audacious move for power yet. When Arsinoe II arrived in Alexandria around 279 BCE, She walked into a royal court that was already a minefield. Her younger brother, Ptolemy II, was now king of the wealthiest kingdom in the world. But he wasn't ruling alone. He was married to a woman named Arsinoe I, who just so happened to be the daughter of the late King Lysimachus. That marriage had been a political deal, just like Arsinoe II's first one, and it had produced the king's heirs. The arrival of the king's famous, beautiful, and tragic older sister sent a shockwave through the palace. Arsinoe II was a woman of immense experience. She'd been queen of two powerful kingdoms and had survived betrayals that would have broken anyone else. She was not about to live out her days as a quiet refugee. She saw an opening. The relationship between Ptolemy II and his wife, Arsinoe I, may have already been fragile. With Arsinoe II now at court, things got tense. Ancient sources, again showing their bias, claim that the master of intrigue immediately started plotting against her sister-in-law. And what do you know? Shortly after her arrival, a conspiracy against King Ptolemy was uncovered. The accused plotter was none other than his wife, Queen Arsinoe I. She was charged with treason, quickly found guilty, and exiled to a remote town in southern Egypt. With his wife and the mother of his heirs out of the picture, Ptolemy II was free to remarry. And his sister, Arsinoe II, was right there, waiting. What happened next was so bold it scandalized the entire Greek world. Ptolemy II announced that he would marry his own full-blooded sister, Arsinoe II. For the Greeks and Macedonians who ran Egypt, this was incest. It was a profound taboo. One poet named Sotades wrote scathing jokes mocking the royal couple and was promptly exiled and killed for it. But Ptolemy and Arsinoe weren't just thinking like Greeks, they were thinking like pharaohs. In the ancient traditions of Egypt, sibling marriage was a way to preserve the purity of the royal bloodline. By marrying each other, they performed a masterful act of political branding. To the Egyptians, they were copying the divine marriage of the gods Isis and Osiris, who were also brother and sister. To the Greeks, they presented themselves as being like Zeus and Hera, the king and queen of the gods. They took the public title Theoi Adelphoi, the sibling-loving gods. Arsinoe became Arsinoe Philadelphus, she who loves her brother. And this was no junior partnership. Arsinoe entered this marriage as an equal. Coins were minted showing their two faces together as co-rulers. In some official records, she was even given the full pharaonic titles of a male king. She wasn't just a queen. For all intents and purposes, she was a pharaoh. She had a direct hand in foreign policy and is credited by some for Egypt's victory in the First Syrian War. She even went with Ptolemy on military tours. In a final, audacious move, she had Ptolemy formally adopt her one surviving son. After she died, Ptolemy's own children from his first, exiled wife were posthumously declared to be the children of Arsinoe II, basically erasing their real mother from history and making Arsinoe the sole matriarch of the dynasty. She had achieved the ultimate victory. She hadn't just survived, she had triumphed, reaching a level of power unheard of for a queen at that time. She turned the tragedies of her life into stepping stones, transforming herself from a political pawn into a goddess on earth. She established her own religious cults, and cities were named after her. She was worshipped as a god in her own lifetime, an incarnation of Aphrodite and Isis. Her cult was so popular it outlasted those of most other rulers in her dynasty, surviving well into the Roman era. Arsinoe died around 270 BCE, after only a few years as Queen of Egypt. But in that short time, she completely redefined the role of a queen. She created the template that all her successors, right down to the famous Cleopatra, would follow, a queen who was not just a wife, but a sister, a co-ruler, and a goddess. So now we have to go back to the beginning. To that horrifying title, the queen raped by her father and forced to marry him. After looking at the brutal and brilliant life of Arsinoe II, what's the verdict? The historical record is clear. There is no credible ancient source to support the claim that Ptolemy I violated his daughter or forced her to marry him. Her documented husbands were Lysimachus, her half-brother Ptolemy Keranos, and her full brother Ptolemy II. The story, as shocking as it is, appears to be a modern myth or a massive misinterpretation, likely confusing her father with her brother husband. But just calling the story false misses the bigger point. The real truth is that the entire system she was born into was its own form of violation. Arsinoe's life was one relentless betrayal after another, carried out by the men who should have protected her. Her father treated her like a political bargaining chip, selling her as a teenager to an old king. Her half-brother used marriage to lure her into a trap, only to butcher her children in front of her. Her full brother, while he made her a god, first needed the convenient exile of his own wife, a plot Arsinoe was almost certainly involved in. Her life was a constant fight for survival in a world designed by and for powerful men, where a woman's body and her children were just tools. So why did this specific, lurid rumor of paternal rape get attached to her story? Because history, especially when it deals with powerful women, often hates complexity and loves a good scandal. Arsinoe was ambitious, ruthless, and politically brilliant. She broke taboos, held immense power, and became a goddess. Women like that have always made some men uncomfortable. And throughout history, one of the easiest ways to discredit a powerful woman is through sexual slander. Her ambition is twisted into unnatural lust. Her political skill is dismissed as sneaky manipulation. The story of incestuous assault by her father serves as a simple, though false, explanation for her later actions. It paints her not as a strategic genius, but as a broken creature whose ambition was just a symptom of trauma. It's a narrative that strips her of her agency. The real horror of Arsinoe's story isn't one secret crime that probably never happened. The real horror is the systemic abuse she faced. The horror is a father who sees his daughter as a commodity. The horror is a brother who sees his nephews as obstacles to be murdered. The horror is a world where a woman's only path to power is through the beds of the men who control her, even if that man is her own brother. The marriage to Ptolemy II, as scandalous as it was her ultimate move of self-preservation and ambition. It was a way to seize power on her own terms, to become the player, not the pawn. She took the broken pieces of her life and forged them into a crown. She refused to be a victim. She chose to be a goddess. The story of Arsinoe II is a powerful reminder that history isn't just a collection of facts. It's a story shaped by who gets to tell it. For centuries, her legacy has been tangled up in whispers of unspeakable crimes and accusations of being an ambitious, unnatural woman. The shocking title of our video reflects the darkest of those whispers. But the truth we've uncovered isn't about a monstrous father. It's about an extraordinary woman who lived in a monstrous world. She was the product of a system that saw her as property, yet she became a ruler of unprecedented power. She endured the loss of her children and the betrayal of her own blood, yet she elevated herself to the status of a living god. Her story forces us to question the narratives we're handed, especially about women who dared to break the rules. It shows how a woman's political genius can be flattened into a simple, ugly story of scandal. Arsinoe wasn't just a victim, and she was no simple villain. She was a survivor, a strategist, and a master of the brutal game of power politics. She took the system designed to control her and bent it to her will, creating a legacy so powerful that people worshipped her for centuries after she died. She was the original Ptolemaic queen who proved that a woman could be more than a wife. She could be a pharaoh. What do you think? Was Arsinoe a tragic victim or a ruthless operator who did whatever it took to win? Was her story twisted by ancient historians who feared female power? Let us know what you think in the comments below. And if you want to keep exploring the hidden lives and forgotten truths of the most fascinating figures in history, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. You won't want to miss our next investigation.